Hey everybody, Jennifer here with the Sewing Report, and I'm about to start on my next quilt. And the pattern I've chosen is by my friend Susie Quilts, and it is called the Retro Plaid Quilt. It promises to be a fun, quick, and easy top, so I'm going to give it a try. I've already cut my pieces out, and one tip I would give you when you're cutting is I actually checked off the pieces as I was cutting them just so I didn't cut duplicates. And I also made sure to label, I kind of used my water-soluble marker and I labeled different pieces with the lengths because some of the background fabrics look kind of similar. So I labeled like 27.5 inch or 31.5 inch just so I know which pieces are which. So I'm ready to get started, and the construction is sort of like a log cabin. So you kind of construct the pieces that way. But I think the layout is very clever and it looks to be fun. So I'm going to be mixing and matching a few different fabric lines in this quilt, but the main color scheme is like blue and aqua and green, which is one of my favorite color schemes. But the main print I'm using is from Lizzie House's Natural History Collection. It's a dinosaur print. Rawr. So I've got that, and then I've got one bright blue print from Carolyn Friedlander's Karkai collection. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm using Kona Snow as the background, and also Kona Wasabi and Kona Bonsai. And then I've also got a kind of random Joel Dewberry, like an aqua print. So I'm gonna get started, and I've got my first two pieces here. And so I guess I'm just gonna start constructing them. But again, it's sort of a log cabin construction, so I think it'll go together kind of fun. I've never made a log cabin quilt, so this will be interesting. Let me move my bucket of supplies. I always like to keep a bucket of supplies that I use frequently, like snips and some other threads, some scissors and stuff like that, just in case I need them. And I've got my sewing machine on, and I'm using Aurifil 50 weight white thread for piecing, and I'm actually going to do, I like to do a smaller stitch length, so I'm going to do a 2.0 stitch length. So it's small enough so that, you know, when you pull your fabric, it doesn't, you know, it's not too loose, but it's not too tight that I can't seam rip either. And I'm using a 1/4 inch piecing foot. So I think I'm ready to go. Let me just get this first piece in here. And this quilt, apparently you can make it in an afternoon. I'm very slow, so I'm gonna guess it's gonna take me a little bit longer. Also, I only have a couple hours to work on it today, so I'm definitely not gonna finish the top today, but maybe by the end of the week, we'll see. Okay. And I'm gonna try to do some chain piecing here, so we'll see how that goes. That might actually make it quicker. And I always like to keep my machine in the needle down position, just so that when I stop, my thread doesn't get out of place. And I'm actually gonna try not glue basting. The piecing for this isn't super precise, and it seems to be a bit more forgiving. So I'm just going to hold the pieces in place as I sew, and hopefully that goes okay. And I do want to let you know, the other reason I decided to mark the background fabrics is because I treated one side with Scotchgard, and I wanted to make sure that that side was always up. So I actually made a little mark showing what size the piece was and also what side was right side up, just so I knew. Because I don't want the Scotchgard fabric side, you know, on the side that's inside the quilt, because I want it on the outside so that it actually helps protect the quilt. So we'll see how fast. It took me, I'm slow, and I don't know, the cutting probably took me 2 to 3 hours, which for me is kind of fast. A lot of people are like, wow, I finished that in an hour, and I just can't. Even a 15-minute project takes me 2 hours. So, but you know what, everybody rolls differently, and that's cool. I just know that I need to add extra time onto any project because that's just the way I am. Normally I like to press my seams to the darker fabric like this. So see, my seams are going towards the aqua fabric. But if I do that for both of these pieces, like if I was pressing this section towards this blue fabric, my seams won't nest when I try to put these two pieces together. So see, these pieces, the bulk of it would all be on one side. So for these corner pieces, I'm actually going to press my seams towards the lighter fabric, even though that's not something quilters would typically do. Because when I go to, and I'm actually going to glue base these seams, when I go to glue base them, see how this fits nicely? So this is what I'm going to do for these pieces. So if you would like to reduce the bulk of these seams, that's my recommendation. Okay, so I'm almost done with the first two big triangles. I'll just finish up this last seam. And I am just basically holding this in place since this seam doesn't need to be lined up precisely. You don't really need to pin or glue baste it. You can sort of just fold the fabric. And I've got the 1/4 inch foot on, so it's pretty mindless, so that's good. Alright, and that's it. Just snip off the ends of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and press this last seam, and then this section of the quilt top is finished. Okay, so I finished my two larger triangles, and it took me about 2 hours, and I would say I'm about 35% done with the top. So total, this top should take me about 6 hours. And then if you add it to the pressing and cutting time, about 9 hours total, which for me is actually really fast. So you can actually make this top in a day, start to finish. I'm a very slow sewist, so that's why it's taking me so long. And I'm also breaking up the steps into a few different days. So I do want to tell you though, if you are using a directional print like I am, you're gonna need to plan the layout a little bit. I actually laid all my pieces out on the floor just to make sure all my dinosaurs were facing right side up, and this quilt will have a correct side up where all the dinosaurs are facing up. So that's something to keep in mind. I also do want to clarify something from the cutting instructions. I was a little bit confused, and I'm not sure if I read this wrong, but it says you need 1/3 of the Firefly Dots mint print, which for me, I substituted it for this Joel Dewberry print. So you actually do need to have you need to cut 4 5.5 inch strips and then subcut each one into 2 different pieces. So you should have 8 strips total when you're done of this print, otherwise known in the directions as the Firefly Dots mint. Because I kind of read it to be cutting just 2 5.5 inch strips at first, but you actually need to cut 4. I'm not sure if there's a typo, but the directions say you need 1/3 of a yard of this print, and you actually need closer to 2/3. So just wanted to kind of clarify that. That was the only part I found a little bit confusing, but other than that, it's been great so far, and this has been a really fun sew. So next, I'm actually going to trim off these ends here just to make it a flush line, and then I'm going to start on the next 2 triangles. At this point in the piece, the instructions call for you to trim off this excess fabric. So here's how I've been doing it. I lined up this triangle block, and I used this first triangle as my guide to make sure it's flush with one of the lines, any line on your cutting mat. So then I'm taking my ruler, and I'm actually going to line it up also with that same line on the cutting mat. Just doing that. Okay. And then all you're going to do, so you see this excess fabric is going, once you trim it, it will be flush. Just hold down your roller and use your rotary cutter to trim this off. And you've got this little excess flap, so you can save it for your scrap bin or throw it out. Alright, so this section is done, and now I'm just going to move this piece down a little bit, and then I'm going to do the same thing where I will just line up this section with the line, and then I'm just going to do the same thing. Take my ruler, just make sure it lines up with everything. So I'm using both the block and the ruler line as my guide, and you can see I'm also lining it up on the other side as well. So I'm just making sure that I'm following this straight line so I can ensure a straight cut. All right, so that looks pretty good. So again, I'm just going to hold this down and I'm going to trim. And now you've got a straight piece here. So now, after this, I'm going to add the next 2 lines of sashing, and then I'm going to trim it down again, and then I will have my completed triangle block, and then we'll finish up the construction. Just keep in mind, Susie does recommend that because this triangle was cut in the bias, if you manhandle it too much or stretch it, it's going to distort and warp your fabric. So just make sure not to handle this triangle a whole lot. You should be good. So let's move on and finish up these blocks. In most every sewing and quilting project you're going to have to set your seams and press them. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So this is a piece that I sewed together. It's the sashing, and then it's this corner square. So in most scenarios you're going to be pressing to the darker fabric. So you always want the fabric you want the seam allowance going to on top. So in this case, it's the darker fabric. So all you have to do is take your iron and press down for like a second. And what this does, it flattens your seams and it'll kind of lock them in place. So the next thing you'll do is flip your top fabric over, and notice the seam allowance is going towards it, and then you'll finger press in place. So finger press this, and then take your iron again and just set in place for a second. So you want to press, give it a good press. You can even use some steam. And that's it. Why, hello there. It's day 5 and I finally have my blocks laid out and I'm ready to sew the sashing pieces on. But here's the thing, if I follow the instructions exactly, this is going to be my middle square, and I think I want something with a higher contrast level. So I'm going to switch it out with this Kona Bonsai solid instead. And just like that, my retro plaid quilt top is finished. Total, it took me about 9 hours to make it, about 3 for pressing and cutting, and then about 6 for construction. So you could very easily make this quilt in a day. I just chose to spread it out over several days just because that's the times I had to work on it. I also would say I found this quilt very enjoyable to work on. There are certain blocks in certain quilt tops I've made where I found either really boring after a while or really frustrating and difficult, and I felt like this pattern was right in the middle, so it was a good happy medium. So if you're a confident beginner and you're looking for a pattern that challenges you a little bit but also looks a little more complicated than it really is, this pattern is definitely for you. And did I mention it's also totally free? Susie Quilts designed the pattern in partnership with Birch Fabrics, so you can download it right now on the website and get started. So that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up and definitely subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more. I just ordered the backing fabric, so in a future video I will be showing you how to base and also how to do the actual quilting and then the binding. So stay tuned. I'll see you next time. I'm Jennifer Moore for the Sewing Report.